Hi, everyone. Welcome to Morbid Planet. I'm your host, Erin Chapman. So tonight we have a guest that's really cool. I really love this project that he works on. He's the owner and host of a new YouTube channel that you definitely need to check out and subscribe, like the videos as well. And it's called The Vampire's Castle. So please welcome the host and the creator, Sean Rourke.
Thank you very much for having me, Erin. This is very exciting.
So I just wanted to start off, I looked at a lot of your stuff, but for our viewers that don't know, that haven't checked out your channel, how would you kind of explain to us what the Vampire's Castle is about?
Oh, well, yes, absolutely. So, when I decided that I wanted to do a YouTube channel that was all about vampires, I looked at kind of like the other stuff that was already out there because I was like, I kind of feel like myself, you, the couple other people who are doing this kind of stuff, it's like, I don't feel like I need to retread any ground that anybody else is doing. I feel like that's kind of the YouTube record already exists of that sort of thing. And, like at first I was like, well, should I be reviewing vampire movies and TV shows? Should I be doing like in-depth analysis of Buffy the Vampire Slayer or anything?
Yeah.
And it was like, there were already other people who were doing that, and they were doing it a lot better than I could. So I was like, all right, so what do I really care about that would be an interesting angle that is also something that I would not get sick of doing? It just came down to like, I've always been fascinated by, just the creative process and storytelling in general. And I find that, where I get excited about vampires is in the movies and the comic books and the role-playing games and the video games and stuff like that. And I always loved reading your stuff because it was, in depth and like this, like, academic studies of the
Mine's a mixed
vampire.
mash.
And well, I felt like it's very highly intellectual stuff that that is not research that I could ever do or would even know how to go about doing.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, that's awesome. And I would be absolutely no good at that. But like, I have seen all of the subspecies movies. So that's kind of like, that's sort of the direction that I wanted to go in. So, and at first I was like, well, okay, so I could interview like novelists and, game designers and directors and, maybe a couple actors in there.
Yeah.
And I started doing the math and I was like, that's a lot of interviews. And I was like, that's a lot of people to be contacting and scheduling and talking to. And even though I want to talk to all these people, I like made this huge list. I was like, I need to have some stuff in this YouTube channel that is going to be stuff that like I can just do in a vacuum, where the only person that I need to actually show up is me. So I started, so I kind of came up with the idea of like, oh, well, if this is about creativity in the vampire genre, then it should be not only about like what has come before, but like, what are you going to do with it? And so once I kind of hit on that, I was like, oh my God, all right. So let's just talk about stuff like what are the different aspects of being a vampire? And then how does that pertain to a story that you're going to come up with? It's sort of like a writing prompt series in a lot of ways, where it's like, okay, so for example, the first episode is all about vampire strengths.
Yeah.
And so I just go through and list all of them, from the obvious ones all the way down to the super obscure ones, and give some examples of like how they've been used before and which ones have not really been used before, so that like that's fertile ground for you to do something cool with it. And just sort of like give a buffet of stuff for creators to kind of look at and think, oh, well, what is the vampire prince in my story going to be like? What are his strengths going to be like? I did one on vampire weaknesses, and I just did one on all the different ways to make a vampire. And I've got stuff coming up that's like, you know, how old is your vampire and what does that mean, and the burden of immortality, and how much blood does a vampire drink, and what is vampire love all about, and vampire society. And like,
it's almost like the way you explain it, it makes me think it's almost like you're having your own kind of version of an encyclopedia, but you're doing it visually for people who don't want to read encyclopedias. Because, you know, we all don't want to read sometimes, you know, pages and pages. Sure. But yeah, that's just what popped in my head as you said that, because it's like, you know, if you like look in Gordon Melton's and you kind of can look at stuff and it's like, oh, well, I want to know all about strengths with vampires. But it's kind of cool because then now you've condensed it into like, here's an episode, you can just watch this.
Yeah. So, yeah. And one of the things that I really like about YouTube nowadays, and it's something that I actually use YouTube for personally for all kinds of different things, is not exactly so much watching it, but just listening to it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if for me to talk for 50 minutes about all the different strengths that vampires have ever used and have, you know, I'm very careful to, like, you know, put all sorts of visual elements in there and artwork and stock footage and graphics and things like that, so that if you are watching it, it is visually interesting for you. Right. Yeah. But if you happen to be, you know, like myself, if like it's the middle of your work day and you hit that point where you're like, okay, now I just have this monotonous thing that I need to do for an hour, then like I call up YouTube and like type in a couple, you know, things that I'm interested in, and it shows me like, okay, well, here's a 50-minute episode about the architects of ancient Arabia. Great. Hit play. And I'm not watching it at all. I'm just listening to Jeremy Irons tell me all about, you know, Arabia circa 8000 BC.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that was kind of, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of where the genesis sort of came from. And then in once I kind of came up with that, I was like, oh, okay. So between interviews and sort of like, you know, sort of lecture series kind of stuff, there are also sort of some other things that I want to do. And before I knew it, it was like a multi-format show. I'm also doing a thing called Chapter 1, which is so much fun, where you know, something that I've noticed is that in the indie book space, there's sort of like, you know, if you're going to publish a novel on Amazon, it's sort of like throwing something into the ocean in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard to get any traction. And so like, I constantly find myself wanting for there to be places where, you know, new and indie authors can like put their stuff and have it be promoted a little bit. And so I was like, well, maybe a good way to do this would be to have some indie authors on the show who have written vampire books.
Yes.
And just read the first chapter out loud. And then that way it's kind of like, it's the same thing. Like if I'm sitting there at work and it's like, oh, here's somebody's going to read me the first chapter of this indie book that I've never heard of, never would have found on my own, but I'm just going to sit here and listen to it. By the time I'm done with the first chapter, I'm like, I want to read this whole thing. Where do I go and buy this? And then, like, you know, go and buy it. And then, you know, that gets some eyeballs on some newer people's work and gets them a couple of sales. And like, that makes me very excited. Like I love being able to, you know, meet all of these people.
Or like when I interviewed Gordon Melton, I even had some people I saw post in some Facebook groups. They're like, I went and bought his encyclopedia now. And I'm like, yes.
That's great.
So yeah, so that's what I'm really happy for.
That is great.
Yeah.
That's great. And especially that book, everybody should have that book.
I know he sent me a copy and I was like, yay, just the fact that I was in it, but I'm like,
you're in it. Oh my God, look at that.
I was really excited. He asked me last year, and because we've known each other a few years, and he's like, do you want to be in my new encyclopedia? I was like, yes. So yeah, I got a write-up in there and everything. So he sent me a copy after. So yeah, it was really good.
Just like on the checklist of like dreams come true.
Yeah, I'm like, I got that one now. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so it was good. No, that's good. Like I liked how on the description as well, it talks about you want to do like tropes and other things, because again, it just gives everyone something for everybody who comes to your channel. So
Right. Yeah. And it's also that's kind of, I'm trying to hit stuff that I'm not really seeing anywhere on YouTube. And so like, I can not that this is bad or anything, but like there are a million videos about like the vampire trope of like a love triangle between a vampire, a human, and a werewolf, or a werewolf, a witch, and a vampire, or
we've
whatever
got
that.
Twilight.
Oh yeah, and it's and like I am all for that. I even have a credit on one of the Twilight movies. I got to work on one of those, so that's
Ooh.
like that's a
Which
a point
one?
of pride. It was Breaking Dawn Part 1.
Okay.
I was working for one of the visual effects companies that worked on that one. So if you've seen the movie, you see the scene with the wedding cake and the dream wedding. That was all us. I haven't seen a video about like what are all the instances of a vampire trying to blot out the sun. That's going on the list, and so I have an episode coming up about that. And
nice.
So trying to get into sort of some of the more obscure things, and the stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think of off the top of your head, but as soon as you see what the title is, you're like, oh, okay,
yeah,
let's see what that's about.
No, that's cool. I like that. So I know, like, just because we've gone into it a little bit before, but I know most people have like this aha moment in their life when just something pops to them. When and what was your moment for when you got into vampires as like a fan? Was this a thing like a lot of us, it started when we were kids? Was it later in life? When was yours?
There is a photo of me somewhere in the second grade dressed up as Dracula for Halloween.
Nice.
And I would love to say that was my aha moment, but it wasn't. I actually hadn't even remembered that I'd done that until I was flipping through a photo album at home.
You're like, oh.
I was like, what? But it's an excellent question. I feel like there have kind of been like three. I've kind of had three moments that all kind of had to happen in succession to sort of get me to this place.
Okay.
And the first was which I just talked about in an episode I just posted that was not planned. That was sort of like a memorial for Anne Rice, who we just lost a week ago. But I was remembering, at one point when I want to say like 12 or 13, and we were in the car on the way to see Phantom of the Opera. And my dad just happened to be telling me about the audiobook that he was listening to of Interview with the Vampire.
Oh, okay.
And so I just like the way that he was describing Lestat, just really, it kind of stuck with me. And then a couple of years later, I saw The Lost Boys for the first time.
Oh, okay.
And that was it. Like I was all in at that point. And like, this is me in high school, and I'm just, I'm writing little short stories about vampires and, the people that I know at school, and, who had what magical powers, and, who was dating who and stuff like that. It's like basically Sean's high school fan fiction about his high school, I guess. But then when I got to college, about a year or two in, somebody introduced me to Vampire the Masquerade, and everything just kind of clicked into place. And I just really haven't looked back after that. And so I find that since college, I've sort of gone through several cycles of, projects that I'm working on, stories that I'm working on, and the vampires will kind of come and go, but they're the only thing that keeps coming back.
Okay.
That I can't quite seem to get away from. So yeah, obviously there's something to them that kind of stems back to those sort of, that's built on those three moments that kind of there was no turning back.
I guess it's safe to say that like you created your channel here just because you're an extreme fan of vampires, which we've discussed here. how far does your interest go? Like, you've touched a little bit on it, but are you more like film buff, book lover? Do you have aspirations to write, or is there certain types of films or certain types, like, I know there's some who just like academic stuff, or some like just folklore, or what's your thing?
Sure. No, it's an excellent question. And I never really quite know how to answer this. You're absolutely right in that this channel specifically is a fan thing,
Yeah.
and the fact that it gives me an excuse to talk to creators whose work that I have enjoyed either recently or have for a very long time. So and also just the being able to break down sort of the science of storytelling and specifically in how it pertains to vampire stories is really fascinating to me.
Okay.
But I think a part of that reason is that I do work in the movie industry, so it is kind of my day job, and I've been steeping in it for over 20 years now. So it kind of permeates everything in my life. But also, I mean, I've been writing vampire stories, like I say, since high school. I've got sort of a backlog of novels that I've written that
Oh,
are sort of in their late stages of editing, and if I'm being perfectly honest, I haven't started releasing them yet because I'm leaving some space for whatever happens in the last couple books in the series. I need to foreshadow in the first couple, so it's like I
yeah.
don't feel like I can just let them go out there yet.
Okay.
But I also I went to film school, and have been on and off since coming to Los Angeles, been shooting projects with friends for all kinds of different reasons, and recently I finished work on a short film that is vampire related.
Ooh,
And so I got to spend a couple weekends sort of in a little vampire fantasy directing that.
that's fun.
And so that's something that is in post right now, and I'm planning on releasing on my channel at some point once it's finished. But so I guess like the channel itself is really sort of my way of nerding out, and sort of
That's a good way to put
having,
it.
yeah, exactly. And it's sort of, it's having a like a sounding board to talk about ideas.
Your creative
uh
outlet for you nerding out.
yeah, exactly. And to hear how other people do it, like
Hmm.
I really love being able to hear, like, what is the process of Chelsea Quinn Yarbrough.
Hmm.
I mean, that just absolutely blew my socks off when I talked to her about all that, and being able to ask her all those questions and like have her answer them. So yeah, I mean, I think ultimately the channel is me being able to nerd out, but at a certain point I will probably show a little bit of my own stuff on there too.
That's
So
exciting. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing that.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Yes. So, what kind of, like, I get how you wanted to kind of do this to, not everything is out there that you wanted. And a lot of people do this kind of thing that I've discovered, whether it's writing and they have like a podcast, or they have a blog, or, they do videos and they do it to fill more of a void because they're not seeing what they want to see out there.
Yeah.
Um, do you find this also kind of motivated you to like just go in and do this channel? Because I think you and I were talking about it, and it's been a long time in the process of like prepping and everything. So can
Yes.
you tell us a
Yes.
little bit about that? And
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. I will watch YouTube channels and episodes about like how to YouTube,
yes, I do
and
too.
excellent. Well, I mean, it kind of seems like something you and I should be watching.
I know.
And one of the pieces of advice that I seem to keep seeing people say is like, just don't think that hard about it. just like get in there and just start making some videos and posting them, because you'll find out what's working and what's not, you know, after you do like 50 videos or something like that. And nobody's ever going to go back and watch your original videos anyway, so it doesn't matter. And I'm like,
but they might. It
kind of like in most cases, like I understand that, but unfortunately I edit for a living. And so if I ever try to go get another job and somebody just like Googles me and some super janky ass YouTube video comes up that doesn't look kind of polished, they're going to be like, nope. Throw that resume out. So I was like, okay, well, I will actually take the time to try and, you know, refine this show before I actually release any episodes. And so, like I spent 4 years from the point where I was like, oh, I really want to do this, to
releasing out the world.
Exactly. It was, you know, first of all, like I spent months just like, well, what kind of episodes would I do? And then like I started contacting people and like I started working on, well, what are my graphics going to look like? What's the color palette? Like, what's the feel of this? What, you know, and so all the way up through like optimizing like all of my editing settings so that making an episode would take the least amount of effort possible, but yet also look at a certain quality level. So
you just made it all very efficient.
Exactly. Like it kind of had to be that way. I have to make this so that once I post an episode, I can have 5 days off to just like decompress and do life stuff and watch TV with my wife and my dog and all that sort of thing. And so that then by the time it's time to start editing again, I've had a break. And the answer to the first part of the question, which I think is sort of what I landed on, midway through that process when it came to the interviews. Because it's sort of the backbone of the show in a lot of ways, because you know those are the people with the name value that are gonna you know be people that you recognize. And I was looking at like, well, okay, so like which you know, which creators should I be talking to? And I realized that like this is actually an opportunity for the vampire genre in general. Because and once I realized that, like it was like, oh, okay, that's the approach. This is not for me. I certainly enjoy doing it, but like the idea that the interviews can be a time capsule for people in the future or in the present who are writing their own vampire projects, to be able to see interviews with people who are, you know, well-established creators, and see how they came up with their ideas and like what their inspiration was and sort of what their story was and what they had to go through.
It's like a look behind the curtain for some people. That's the way I like it.
Exactly. And it's so I treat all these interviews sort of as like, this is something for posterity. And I guess I envision like some grad student 75 years from now, like discovering this ancient YouTube technology and being like, oh my God, this dude actually interviewed these authors who, like, there are no other interviews with them. Brian over at Toothpickings did an interview with the director of Dracula. And I've never seen an interview with this guy before. And he's, you know, made that movie decades ago. So he's getting up there in years. I don't know how many more people are going to be interviewing him on a regular basis. And so like, once I saw this great, you know, hour-long in-depth interview with him, I was like, wonderful. That now exists. That's up on YouTube. It's there for posterity. Great. We've got him. We've got the director of Dracula. And now, so that one, we can take that one off the list. Excellent. He is covered. I will say, just, I mean, this is kind of inside baseball, but yeah, I've found that when it comes to talking with actors, directors, screenwriters, it's a little harder to get to them than it is like authors, video game people,
you've got so many
academics.
more walls in front to
Yeah,
get through.
For sure. And the movie industry is built that way, so that there are gatekeepers between the average person and those people. And so like I totally get that. But I have noticed that like out of all the interview requests that I send out to people, it's the movie people who I never hear back from. And like I get it. They're not even receiving those emails.
And that goes back to like, I guess one of the things I looked at on your website was it said that yes, you watch Legacies. And I was going to say, because you watch Legacies, does that mean you are a fan of the Vampire Diaries and the originals? And if so, because I'm guessing if you watch that, you must be. What's your take on the series as being a fan?
I cannot say that I have seen all of Vampire Diaries or the originals.
Okay.
I have seen a lot of Vampire Diaries. I found myself dipping in and out of Vampire Diaries. My wife kept up with the whole series.
Okay.
And in fact, she has regularly reminded me that like I started watching it and then I ditched out, and she had to keep watching it because she was like, I'm so invested now. Yes. And so like when I came back like a season later, she was like, oh, now you want to come back and hang out with me and watch this. The reason why I ditched in and out of the Vampire Diaries was not because I didn't like it. It's because I actually have a huge amount of respect for the fact that in a single episode of Vampire Diaries, like an entire season of Buffy was crammed in there in terms of like, you know, people's relationships and stuff that was how like turns
so much going on.
Like, it was dense. And like, you know, I would sit through like 6 or 7 episodes and be like, oh my God, wait, but there's like so much lore we've established now. And it's like the stake of the white tree is the only way, and the original 3 and the thing and what's made when it's just a werewolf does this, but when you get to this, and I was just like,
and it just keeps going. You keep peeling the onion, and there's just so much.
There's so much. And so I just like, I kind of got saturated on it. I was like, I don't think I think I have I don't have enough brain cells at the end of the day to keep up with this. And so that's why I would kind of get in and out of the pool on that one. But I've pretty much been all the way through Legacies now. I've watched that pretty much every week. I think I may have missed 2 or 3 episodes. But I have a friend who is writing on it now, and wasn't when it started, but he's on it now, and he's somebody who, you know, I've always loved supporting his work. But even if he wasn't on it, I just loved the idea of you know, how do we, because it's been like 10 or 15 years now, and like, you know, these immortal vampires who never change are getting older. And so how do we keep this world going, still tie it all in, but keep it interesting, and deciding to go with sort of the Harry Potter route of making a school for vampires, witches, werewolves, fairies, you know,
you name
all
it.
The other exact muses. And doing that, I was like, okay, this is great. It has the episodic network model to it by design. That's what it's made for, and that's the business model that it's in. So it's not giving you the kind of story that you would get on a streaming service, but I'm totally cool with that, because it gives me enough of a Buffy vibe to where I'm I really love the actors, and I really love the characters. And so whatever their adventures are, I'm in.
Okay. I like to ask, because you get a lot of people in the vampire genre, when you mention things like Vampire Diaries or Twilight, they're just like, oh, Twilight makes me want to puke. Oh, I can't believe you watched this. Like, there's so much negativity that goes with it. So that's why
I have to say, like, I'm glad you bring that up, because like I absolutely love the Twilight movies. Like I love them. And they were some of the most fun I have had in a movie theater in my life. Like going on opening night where it was nothing but little girls and their moms.
Yes.
All of whom were screaming every time Jacob took his t-shirt off. Like that is the way to see a movie. It is amazing. This anecdote I'm not going to get quite right, but so I go to Comic-Con every year.
Okay.
And the year that Twilight happened, there was Twilight, there was a Twilight panel.
Oh, okay.
And Comic-Con has, for those of you who've gone, I'm talking about. For those of you who don't, there's one gigantic hall. It's called Hall H.
Okay.
And you can fit like 20,000 people in this hall. Like it's just massive. And so like the biggest panels, like all the Marvel movie panels,
the main headliners, like, kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. The main movie panels take place in that hall. And so like the line starts to get into this hall like a day in advance. And because there's like 120,000 people come to Comic-Con every year, and like that's where the most exclusive, like they show scenes from the movies that you're not going to see again for another year. So so Twilight happens, and they're doing a Twilight panel, and I think it was before the second movie came out or something. It doesn't make any difference, but because the Twilight panel was going to be happening, all of these people who were not your regular Comic-Con goers, but who had gotten Comic-Con passes just to see Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart and the cast, all showed up as all these young girls and their moms, and they completely took over the line days ahead of time. And so when everybody showed up with, their Green Lantern t-shirts on, they were like, what the hell? Who are all these people? And they were all like, yeah, Team Edward. And so like the following day, there was this nerd rage that was just carpeting Comic-Con. People had made signs that night that said Twilight ruined Comic-Con. And we're walking around with this, and like, so it's this whole move. I mean, I say a movement. It was like, it's probably like, I don't know, 200 people. Really,
even a couple hundred people. That's still a lot that are just that angry.
Exactly. Because they have like every year I come, I get in this line, I go inside, I see all my trailers, and then I go and I tell my friends on Facebook, and like didn't get to do it this year because all the Twilight people were there. And so in that same hall, like that following night, Kevin Smith does a regular panel where he gets up and he just talks about whatever for an hour. Okay. And that has its own following of people who go to that. And I wasn't there for the panel, so I'm totally paraphrasing this, but I heard about it afterward, where he basically said, all you people out here who are saying Twilight ruined Comic-Con, let me give you some context for what you are railing against. Because of this movie and this book series, an entire generation of kids, PS, who are all women, came here to watch stuff for a vampire story. That's going to be the next generation of fans. And they're going to be into all kinds of things that are not Twilight, but like because they are being introduced to this vampire story, they're going to be fans for life of all of this stuff.
Yes, because they started.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's like, cut it the fuck out. These are your people too. They just haven't grown up yet.
They're just younger. They're kids.
Exactly. And once he said that, I was like, yes. yes. Like and this is like my own personal anecdote. I'm sorry if I'm talking too long
it's okay
here, but
no, this is cool.
But I remember it was I think we were 2 or 3 books into Twilight, and my wife and I walked into a Borders, which for those of you who are younger, that used to be a bookstore. Okay. and that here in the States. And we walked in, and on the very front table, where like publishers pay to have their books on that space, there was a sign that said vampires. And there were all the Twilight books, but there was also like Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead, and there was House of Night by PC and Kristen Cast, and a whole bunch of other, Vampire Diaries books by LJ Smith. And so like, I saw this and I was like, wait, it's April. Like usually this table comes out in October.
Yeah, but it's there because of fans.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, this is a watershed moment. Like, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
And it has been that way ever since. And so we have Twilight to thank for that. So I can't say enough good stuff about Twilight.
And I guess like this goes to my next question, just how it's like my interest for vampires is a lot more like pop culture aspect, as opposed to other people we've touched on have like historical, folklore, academic. If you had to pick one as a preference, what would be yours? It sounds like you do like a lot of pop culture, but it sounds like you kind of intertwine it with other things.
It would definitely be pop culture.
Okay.
Like, and that's where I'm very careful to keep my channel specifically like in that realm.
Okay.
Having started this channel now, I've gotten to meet a couple of wonderful academics, including Mr. Melton and yourself. And
I'm not an academic.
Well, I think of you as that. But people who are very book smart about the history of vampires and research, Hans de Roos, so Magdalena Grabius. Like I went to I kind of attended as much as I could the Dracula conference that took place.
The online one, right? That they did.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Due to COVID, it was online. I was like, oh my God, I actually get to go because it's on Zoom. And I mean, I just ate that stuff up with a ladle. Like it was great. And all of these wonderful people that I, got to ask questions of and got to become Facebook friends with a couple of them afterward. Yeah. And so like, I definitely have this place of love and respect in my heart for the people who, do the hardcore academic stuff and like really, not only, vampire history and anthropology, but also just like the academic study of the novel Dracula, of the novella Carmilla, like all of this stuff, like being able to listen to conference level panels about this, I completely nerd out over, and I do not have the tool set to ever do something like that. So I'm just a fan of those folks and what they do. But yeah, if I need to stick in my own lane, it's definitely going to be pop culture for sure.
Okay. If you had to pick, and I know it's hard when people ask me this, but I like to find out, what is your favorite vampire book and why?
That's really hard.
Yeah, I know.
I would say that like there are a lot of vampire books that I've read that I have loved, that I have massive respect for because of what they did for the genre. Be whether that be Salem's Lot or Interview with the Vampire or Hotel Transylvania or whatever those might be. Yeah. But I've got to say, I think the one that I really loved, like I could not put down, was Fever Dream by George R.R. Martin. Okay. And part of that was the audiobook that I was listening to had an excellent narrator. And in fact, for anybody listening, if you want a fantastic vampire story read by an incredible narrator, Fever Dream is like what I would point everybody to. It is awesome. The 2-cent description of it is vampires on a riverboat on the Mississippi back in the early 1800s. That's and cool. Like when you say it out loud, you're like, okay, but like I swear to you, 5 sentences in, you're going to be like, wait, really?
Nice.
And it just holds you the whole way through. Amazing characters, great mythology.
And I love the fact when people endorse something as well, because then you're like, oh, it's got to be good, because there's nothing more disappointing, I find, if you watch a film or, you know, you read a book, then you're like, I'm not getting back that 2 hours of my life because
For sure.
I don't know what I just watched.
For sure.
Because again, it's hard picking, but say if you had to pick your top 5 vampire films, what would you say are like your top 5?
Thank you so much for giving me 5, because if you had asked me for one, I would be like,
I know it's hard. It puts people on the spot.
Yeah. 5. Well, I can Lost Boys, obviously. Coppola's Dracula, I know, is a controversial one, especially for people who are book lovers, but it is excellent. And not only that is a hill I'm willing to die on, is defending the fact that that movie came the closest to getting the book right. And the complaint about the love story between Dracula and Mina is legitimate. That was not in Stoker's book. But I contend that it does fix a problem that I had with Stoker's book.
Okay.
In that I didn't get any Dracula for most of the book. Yes. And so this was a way to get Dracula into the movie where I wanted him to be. Yeah. And I think that it was handled exceptionally well. And obviously, if anyone would like to have a discussion about this, I'm happy to talk about it. I won't get up on my soapbox here, but I'm very happy to defend every choice that was made in that movie. And that was an important one for me, because I had not read the book yet when I saw that film.
I saw it in the theater as a kid. I was all excited, and I went. That's one of the ones I saw in the theater. So, and
it was lush.
Yeah.
I mean, it was gorgeous, and it was somehow also an art film at the same time, and just really captured that Victorian texture, but in a way that also made it kind of modern at the same time. I mean, Dracula has sunglasses on, for God's sake.
Just the experience that you got from that. It was just, and I guess, like, yeah, I was younger, but still, it was phenomenal watching that.
I have a soft spot in my heart for the Subspecies movies, I gotta say. Blade.
Yeah.
Blade, for sure. I think Blade really captured that modern vampire story way better than it ever should have. That was an incredible movie that I could talk about for hours. And then I'm going to throw on at the end of this list a movie, a Roger Corman film called To Sleep with a Vampire. And this, when you watch this movie, you're going to be like, what is he talking about? But the reason why I put this in here, because it's ostensibly like, and if you watch the trailer for it, you're like, this is 80s softcore pornography. And you're not wrong, but at the same time, it's almost like a 2-person play.
Oh, okay.
It's the story of a woman who has been denied access or has been denied custody of her son.
Okay.
And she is planning on ending her own life. And a vampire who has been watching her swoops in and basically says, I'll do that for you. But let's spend one night together talking, and you can tell me about the day and what life is like during the day. And then right before the sun comes up, I will end your life by drinking your blood.
Okay.
And so that's it. It's just a wonderful, tiny little premise. And most of the movie takes place in the vampire's house, which is a total shithole. And yes, also clearly a movie studio.
Yeah.
But the I found the story. I think part of it is when I watched it, I was really getting into vampires at the time, and it just dealt with a lot of aspects of what being a vampire must be like. That that really just formed a lot of my sort of opinions about what a vampire story should be.
Yeah.
And it's even a remake of an
Oh.
earlier movie that Roger Corman also produced like 8 years previous,
Oh, okay.
called Dance of the Damned. And they're almost exactly the same movie script wise, but the To Sleep with a Vampire is a much better production value. If you can say, you'll probably
had a
watch
better
it and be
budget.
like, yeah, I'd be like, how much better of a budget? But it does. And yeah, there are some sex scenes in it, and there is some nudity, but it really, it feels like watching a black box theater play. And so it's
Okay.
really all about the ideas. So anyway,
Cool.
I digress, but To Sleep with a Vampire is rounding out number 5.
What is the best vampire film that no one knows about?
This is an excellent question. I probably would put that one up.
Yeah. Okay.
But since I get an extra question out of it,
Yeah.
there's another little movie that I'm kind of obsessed with, and I think it was released in the 90s, and it was shot for $7, really.
What?
And I mean, it was probably shot for 100 grand actually.
Yeah, but $7.
But it looks like, but at the time there were not good high definition cameras that were able to mimic not only the frame rate but the focal length and everything of film cameras. So even though it's technically high definition, it still is shot at 60 images per second, so it looks like old television, with like the frame rate and everything. And there's absolutely no depth of field. Like everything is crisp. There's no soft focus in the background, and it was just shot in like people's homes and back alleys here in Los Angeles. And it's called Bram Stoker's Dracula's Curse. And I have
never heard of it.
Yeah, no, and it's I have a feeling it was released this was back in the days of Blockbuster, when
straight to video.
Budget, exactly. Yeah, it was lower budget distributors would get a movie, and there would be another movie that would be out in theaters at the time, and they would do cover art design and a title that made it kind of sound like that one movie
to ride the coattails.
Exactly. Yeah. The hope was that people would rent it by mistake, and that's how the distributor would make their money off that title.
Okay.
Having said that, that is not what the movie is, and it's clearly not what the filmmakers intended it to be.
Yeah.
But it's this vampire movie that takes place in modern day Los Angeles. It's a group of vampire hunters that versus the Society of Vampires in LA and like the High Council of Vampires, and they've decided to call a truce. And so like everybody puts away their weapons and they stops
make friends,
murdering people. And then something happens that kicks off the war all over again. And the reason why I love this movie so much is because not only does it have like a cast of like 70 main characters, but it also makes references like most of the classic literature vampires are represented in here. Like you've got Countess Bathory, and you've got you've got Carmilla in there, I believe is in there somewhere, and you've got Count Orlok, and you've got the director actually plays one of the vampires, and his makeup and costume is the Lon Chaney Sr. London at Midnight look, with like the top hat and all the fangs and so like it's this total love letter to vampire, just like vampires in general. Like everything, including the kitchen sink, was thrown into this movie, including Dracula and Van Helsing.
Yeah.
And so you wind up with just this, it feels like you're watching like a bunch of friends shooting a home movie over like their summer break, like at night, but it does not go with a 3-act structure. It goes in like, it has like a 6-act structure, and like chapter headings, and like all of these, like there's all these different relationships between characters, love between vampires and vampire hunters, and there's like, you know, scorned lovers of Dracula that have, you know, bones to pick with like descendants and stuff like that. So and at the same time it's just like filled with guns and like fight scenes. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's I don't think it's streaming anywhere, but you can rent it on Amazon. It is a real treat, and it is my deepest hope that I can get some of these guys who made this movie onto an episode to
that would be awesome
talk to them about it, because I absolutely love this film.
And if we go back to videos, because I think now you're up to like 15 videos on your channel.
Oh my God, I think you're right.
I think so, yeah. What's your favorite one? Do you have a favorite? Or was there one that you enjoyed the most?
I mean, I feel like my favorite one is always the one I just finished. I think it would be the Chelsea Quinn Yarbrough interview.
Okay.
Just because I'd always wanted to talk to her for, you know, ever since I discovered in Gordon Melton's, you know, book, he has an entry there for not only for her, but also the Saint Germain saga, which is like up to like almost 30 books now. She's been writing since 1970, I think. So I mean, she's exceptionally prolific, and I had no idea what she was going to be like. I just knew that she's this, you know, pinnacle of the vampire genre, and like I love her work. And she was amazing. Like, she was so funny and smart and scathingly witty, and I mean, and like every question I asked her, I got an answer back that I was not expecting at all.
See, that's the fun part. I like that.
Oh man, yeah, it was great. It was great, and we actually wound up talking for 4 hours.
Wow.
Which was amazing. I was just like, I don't ever want this to end. Like, I was not going to be the one to say, I have to stop. Like, I was like,
I've got to go now.
I am having a blast. We will talk as long as you want, and I will edit this down later. So
I'm almost done. I've got like a couple more.
take your time. I'm having the time of my life, okay. Erin.
Cool.
You can. I can't wait to. By the way, everybody, we're going to turn this around. I'm going to interview Erin tomorrow. Yes. So, and that's going to be an episode that goes up on my channel. So.
And then I think we're going to release them at the same time too.
And we'll try to release them at the same time. So you'll get a healthy dose. You'll get both of our sides on this. But yes, I'm having a great time. So
okay, no, that's cool. Speaking of your channel, so I have to say, like, I love your video formats. I love your graphics, and the overall just quality always impresses me when I watch stuff. And I know that you're in editing in the movie business. So I have to ask, do you do everything yourself, like your website? Did you do all the prep work for everything, or like even moving forward as you're doing each video, or do you have people help you?
It's an
you wear many
question.
Hats.
I do wear a lot of hats. Okay. They're all black, but I do wear a lot of hats. Yeah, so the stuff that I do not do is the people who do the things that I don't do are all in the credits of every episode.
Okay.
I have like some super cool anime style kind of artwork of like what looks like a vampire sort of movie poster kind of thing, but like all cartoon looking. That was done by a friend of mine named Marcy Klinger, who is an exceptional illustrator. And she also did the design of the castle that I use as my main
Okay.
logo.
Okay.
And then there is I've had a couple of other artists who have done some other illustrations for me for particular episodes, because I'm not a great illustrator by any stretch. But then in terms of like the graphic design for the episode, that's all stuff that I did.
Nice.
In terms of like, yeah, all of the borders and lower thirds and stuff like that. The animation of the opening title sequence. The music I got on Motion Array on a stock footage site. But in terms of like the imagery, I have a lot of vampires in the imagery of the show, in order to sort of, illustrate the topics that I'm talking about. And those are all friends of mine.
Nice.
They are from, I didn't have just one big photo shoot at one point. The photos are taken from shoots that I have done for 20 years. So going all the way back to, so like there's recent stuff from, just a year ago, going all the way back to 20 years ago when I first moved out to LA. A project that I was working on that I never finished was a vampire based role-playing game that was a rules for live action role play that all sword fighting.
Yeah.
And eventually, and for several reasons, did not ever finish that. The technology for publishing was just not, it wasn't there yet. And I didn't have the knowledge or skill to get it over the finish line. But what came out of that was I did all of these photo sessions with like friends and coworkers and just people that I thought looked cool or interesting as different vampires. And then I never used it for anything. And so now, like 20 years later, I just had this stockpile of photography of people who all were vamped out and doing spooky stuff and like action poses with weapons, and photography from all of these projects that I've done over the last 20 years. And so it's just like, even if they're for, short films or web series or stuff like that, that had no vampires in them at all. It's very easy to just add fangs and some cool eyes to somebody and like replace the background with something gothic. And it's like, oh, now this Instant is vampire. Suddenly Carmilla.
So that's about all we have time for today. And I really enjoyed this. And I think at some point we'll have to have you come back and we can even chat about movies or TV shows, because I think that would be fun.
Absolutely. So, any topic you want to talk about in depth, I am always happy to come back and talk. That's great. And I have a great time talking with you, and like you're one of those people that's in that my personal pantheon. So it's like,
cool.
Anytime Erin wants to talk about something, I will happily come and talk.
Yes, I made it in there. Yes. So I want to thank everyone tonight for tuning in from home. And if you haven't yet, make sure to like this video and subscribe below. I want to thank Sean for coming on. And if you haven't checked out his channel, you guys need to go there and check out The Vampire's Castle. There'll be a link below. And otherwise, thank you so much for coming. I had a great time today.
Thank you. I did too. This was a lot of fun.
And make sure you guys all tune in next week and let us satisfy your morbid curiosity. Stay safe and stay morbid, and bye for now.